Now the next definition that we're looking at is called base anchor extension, and they also refer to as floor anchor extension, but I don't really think that there's a direct definition for this. As I scroll through the glossary, yeah, floor anchor extension is not listed in here. Let's look at anchors for floor, fixed floor anchor. Mullion. Yeah, they don't have anything for base anchor extension, but I know what it is. It's not defined in the SDI glossary directly. At least I don't think it is, except that it has base anchor extension, C, floor anchor extension, but there is no floor anchor extension. And when we search just extension, yeah, it's not defined. They do have a definition called jam extension. A portion of a jam which extends below the level of the floor. See below floor. So here's our base anchor or mullion anchor, as we had just defined. An extension, or a custom or an unusual base or mullion anchor really, is when you have an obscenely out of level floor, to the point where you take your side light frame. Generally, this is going to exist on much wider side light frames, where the floor is so out of level that when you take the large welded steel frame borrowed light unit and place it on the floor, let's say this thing is 18 feet wide, and the floor is not level, and it slopes away. The bottom line is, and they're going to cover that up with casing and other carpentry tricks like that. And when you're dealing with a really old building, I always think of a job that we did maybe in the early 2000s in the West Loop in Chicago, where there were a whole mess of welded side light frames that were mostly 6 foot wide, 3 foot doors, 3 foot side lights, 6'6" on the OD. But we had a couple of units that were about double that. And how we got them into this building, or how the contractor did, we were able to get them into the first floor through a large overhead. And the client literally took a skill saw and cut a giant rectangle in the subfloor, because the finished floor wasn't in yet. Temporarily disturbed the cross bracing between the ceiling joists, and we got it underneath and just lifted it right up into the second floor. So that was, luckily the jam depth wasn't greater than 16-inch on center, less which would have been 1 inch, because they were actually 2-inch thick. They were so old. So luckily the jam depth wasn't greater than 14 or 13 3/4, typical 5 3/4. But in this old building, the floors were really out of level. And you take those 6 foot or 6'6" wide frames, and it may not be so bad, because the height of the base anchor is adequate, so that when your jam or your mullion or your vertical member sits over it, it's going to fall short of making contact with the floor, because here's the door end, and you've leveled it at the door end, okay? But that floor goes down away like this. Well, the bottom of your frame goes straight across. You've got a mullion anchor here. The height of it is okay, where you can actually get a screw into the face of the jam and still hit something. But 12 feet over here, that screw, when going through the jam, is not going to hit anything. So a base anchor extension is basically a base anchor that has larger vertical flanges on it. That's all that it is. It's unusual to need them, but if you encounter a situation where your client says the floor is so out of level, he'll describe to you what he needs, not knowing that there's an actual term or piece of hardware for this. So if you get into that sort of trouble, I would simply recommend that you take your jam anchor, your mullion anchor, and you cut one in half and take the longer parts and weld it to here, and maybe just give it a little bend or a giddy up. So you'll take one of these and you'll cut it right in half. Now you've got two parts. Take another anchor, then take these pieces and just create your own in the shop really quick. Re-drill a couple of holes, the whole 9 yards. Maybe put that into the vise and give it a little bit of an offset so it will come flush to the frame, and explain to the client how you're making it, because time is money. Time is of the essence, and you can have them done really, really quick. But that's what a base anchor extension or a mullion anchor extension actually is. Let's just switch to the screen view and let's take a closer look at some follow-up information. Then we'll move on to the next definition. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. Here is the definition from the SDI Glossary: base anchor extension. See floor anchor extension. So that's all that there really is here. Now, what I'm trying to describe is a situation that would look like this. You know, generally when you've got a frame, like this, no problem, because the floor is not really so out of level. But if you get yourself into a situation where you're doing, whoops, three foot, 3 foot, 3 foot, 3 foot, 3 foot. So you're dealing with something that's going to be, you know, 16 foot, 17 foot wide. You know, you've got your floor here, and the floor is pretty good, but then right about here, it starts to do something like this on you. Well, putting an anchor over here, you're going to need one that's a little bit taller, something maybe more like this is what you'll need, because the idea is when you place that mullion anchor here, it's all good. Well, over here, that same mullion anchor is actually going to be down in here, and it won't even breach into the face of the frame for you to run your screw into. So an extended or a taller mullion anchor is the concept. I hope that illustrates the situation. Unlevel floors are very typical, very common. You do a project where it's all precast concrete, you can guarantee that the floors will not be, they'll be level for purposes of concrete pours, but they're not going to be level for finished hardware necessarily. And that also makes me want to discuss, before we wrap this up, because it's related, and I'm sure that we've talked about it, in terms of floor anchors. Yeah, right here. Adjustable floor anchor, which this definition has already been done, but the same logic here, where if you have a situation where one jam, you have a jam that's making perfect contact with the floor, you have another jam that's not, because the floor goes like this, okay, you're going to need an extended bottom anchor. And they do make adjustable floor anchors, same sort of concept, because you're dealing with something that's poured irregularly. You'll see it in parking garage structures, those stairwell doors that are steel doors and frames that are fire rated. You'll see that there all the time. Okay, let's move on to the next definition, and that is going to be below floor. Let's go on to below floor. Thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.